I was 20 years old and I was a sophomore in college. I was going to community college in Oakland of California by the name of Laney College. I know that after 9/11, teachers felt the need to address the tragedy, right? I think that was an opportunity for students and faculty to really kind of just touch on something that impacted the nation. So it was discussed, and I think the narrative and the perspective that was shared around 9/11, it became obvious that it was inherently Islamophobic. And a lot of times in a lot of the classes that I was in, I was the only visibly Muslim person. So it felt very just uncomfortable, felt ostracized, and I felt eyes on me. Yeah, even though I live in a pretty progressive area, the Bay Area, California is super conscious, but even still, was, so I was pretty pregnant, and I remember one situation specifically because, so I'm visibly Muslim, visibly pregnant, and I was at the supermarket going baby shopping. I was an expectant mother. And there was a couple who came up to me and told me to go back to where I came from. They got really close in my face. The only thing that stood between us was my belly with my baby inside. So it was very, I didn't feel safe, you know, and unfortunately these folks were minorities themselves. So on the one hand, I felt really bad and like the system doesn't like any of us, you or I, but they kind of adopted this Islamophobic perspective and was looking at me as the enemy or a threat. But I don't know what I could do as a pregnant person, you know? But it was very, that's when I really realized that my identity became suspect, that just the way I moved and existed in the world, to some folks seemed you know, either violent or threatening. And I think my life really changed after that moment. Well, there were a lot of threats that the mosques and community centers across the country, right? But there were notices that were sent out from our mosques and different community leaders to be careful, to not go out alone, especially for Muslim women who were hijab. I had a couple of family members who had their hijab ripped off of their head while they were on the public transit system. And then in the hallways on campus, there were looks and different slurs that were tossed around. So I've been called Osama's wife, Osama bin Laden, Osama's daughter. You know, go back to where he came from. That was one that was really, I think until this day, I still get that. So I was born and raised in San Francisco, actually. So this is really where I came from, you know? So, but yeah, I think it was just very, very hard time. And it continues to be a hard time, honestly, because I think the trajectory has always, since 9/11, has heightened, the anti-Muslim sentiment has heightened. Yeah, I think Muslims and Arabs and those who are perceived to be Muslim or Arab in America have always, or for the longest, experienced Orientalism before it became Islamophobia in the post 9/11 or post War on Terror era. And there's always been this, you know, on the one hand, we have the community, they are really afraid and they move quietly and keep their head down. So there's a lot of us who just kind of have lived in isolation because They don't want to have the spotlight on them. And there's a lot of folks who have changed their names. So Muhammad becomes Mo, or Ahmed becomes something totally different to sound Western, as to not to be perceived as a Muslim or Arab, because if they were kind of exposed or revealed that they're Muslim or Arab, then there's the folks have been fired. A lot of our community go through airports, including myself. Every time I go through an airport, whether it's domestic or foreign, I will always have those 4 S's on my boarding pass, and I don't know why. I am taken to secondary screening, searched from head to toe, and my fingers are dusted. So this is a norm, and it has happened. It happened most recently last year, so it hasn't stopped, even though we are 20 years later. My family's from Yemen, and the way the war on terror has impacted folks abroad has been just dramatic and inhumane, and just I don't have the words to really wrap up. You know, I know a lot of our young Yemenis were shipped off to Guantanamo Bay. And Sears, the program that was put in place in 2002 during the Bush administration, which was essentially an old Muslim registry, impacted a lot of our young Muslim brothers and sisters coming from overseas. So, and this continues to exist. So whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in a school campus, Islamophobia impacts us all, and has not declined, especially as we just ended a Trump presidency that, you know, really moved his campaign with Islamophobia leading or driving it. So, yes. When 9/11 happened, I think the first thing, and I've talked to Muslims from every state in my work of advocacy, and also across the waters, everyone gasped, and we were like, I hope they're not Muslim, because we know what it looks like when either those who are Muslim or perceived to be Muslim or claim to be Muslim do something, and then the Muslim community, 1.8 billion Muslims, are then scapegoated. So that was the first thing. As an expectant mother, I mean, already living at the intersection of like racism, sexism, classism, my family, they're immigrants from Yemen. So anti-Arab sentiment, post-Orientalism. So just like living with all of that, and then having to add on this like new system, because Islamophobia is definitely systemic, has become systemic since 2002. So I mean, a lot of worry, anxiety. How am I going to raise my kids in a post 9/11 era and raise them to be proud Muslim Americans who are proud of their American roots and also very much proud of their Muslim identity? Like, how do I do that? You know, in a time where everything that looks like them that is on the news, and there are stories and images that we're being bombarded of, like bombs or you know, different militias or cells, bearded men with weaponry, and Muslim women covered from head to toe, and oppression, and just so many different slurs being thrown at not only them, but also around the community that we live in, because these are our neighbors, our friends and colleagues that watch the news as well. So they know us, but then there's this whole other perspective that is being displayed on the news, and it's super overwhelming. I don't know. I know it's pretty hard for folks to really navigate through like what's true and what is propaganda. So I was just and continue to worry about how I'm raising my children and how they're really holding on to all of these identities and feeling safe, you know, feeling physically safe and feeling emotionally safe, because it's not easy to walk around and have a target on your head, if you will. A hijab in a post 9/11 era really means you have an Islamophobic target on your head. And now my daughter's 20, almost 20, and I have 4 kids total, and they've all experienced Islamophobia and racism on one form or the other, whether it's through their colleagues at school, whether it's like different looks or different slurs when they're out in the world. Are you hot in that? Are you hiding something underneath that? It's just different experiences, but you know, even though 20 years out, it hasn't shifted. Yeah, raising kids or Muslim kids, visibly Muslim kids in America in post 9/11 era has been very exhausting. My children take public transit, and I'm often always worried about how the general population, the general American population, engages with them. They've come home with stories of like different folks on the bus telling them, you know, are you hot in that? Are you hiding something underneath that? Referring to my daughter's hijab. And I have a teenager who has a beard now, and he's been called Osama. He wasn't even born during that time. He didn't even know who Osama was. You know, in school, whether they're talking about different, you know, they go over world history, they go over world religions in high school. And my son, during that class, his teacher put up a video of ISIS. So the content that they chose to show young folks who are super impressionable, they're still learning about the world, and the content that they chose to display about Islam was ISIS, which is definitely not a true reflection of our religion. It is Islamophobic, and I had to have a talk with the school. But why are we even having to talk about these things, you know? And my son felt embarrassed. He was mad at the teacher. He himself did not know what ISIS was or what they did and who they represented, because they definitely do not represent the faith that we follow. Which is something that my kids have always had to deal with. Like, why are they treating us this way? Why are they looking at us as different? We go to school together, we live in the same community. And it's so just depressing as a mom to see young kids, my young kids, having to experience this. I think that Americans, we need to do better.